All right, we are live. It is the Tesla beat. I feel like we're now a quarter. I was going to say a quarter of a century, but we've now done 25 straight episodes, other than I think we've missed 1 week so far this year just due to the Tesla takeover. But yeah, so we're on episode 25. We have the full squad here today. We have Jeff, the Jeff Lutz. We have Amy at SF at underscore SF Tahoe, and then Joe Tesla Corsa Race I was gonna say something else, but then I saw your title. I thought I'd go with that. But yeah, no. So it's great to have everyone, and thank you all for just giving your time each week to make the Tesla beat what it is today. So let's get into it. Tesla stock has softened a little bit this week if you're just kind of looking at the week over week trends. So again, not financial advice. Who knows? These are the type of dips you could be looking for. And we have it was like 275 last week. It's dipped to 254, but year to date, it's at 136% up. So yeah, so it could be an interesting time to look if you saw it kind of like make its 10% run last week. All right, so clearly can't. I thought this. How did I not edit that? It should have been down. But either way, okay. So sorry about the slide. But yeah, this morning, Sawyer. It's weird on my screen on the Google slides. It's fine, but UAW is calling for GM and Stellantis. I can't say that right.
Stellantis,
exactly. To stand up and strike. So at least what I know, and I would love to get everyone's take on what you're seeing happening with the UAW, because it's really an interesting time in the auto space right now. I mean, all of these companies are scrambling to make EVs, even though we know it's not going to be profitable till the end of the decade. But as we continue to see, there's been a lot of layoffs happening too. I think we saw GM and Ford both lay off people. So here the UAW is continuing to throw these strikes, and people are just, they're actually losing their jobs instead. I think also Sawyer put out a tweet that Ford and GM are making a lot of Ford and UAW are making a lot of progress. But yeah, I would love to get everyone's thoughts on what you've been seeing happening with these strikes, and how this is either potentially advantage, obviously an advantage to Tesla, but kind of like what you're seeing in relation to these legacy auto strikes.
I don't really know a lot about the UAW or unions in general, but I mean, this just, if there was ever, like, for the legacy OEMs, if there was ever a better excuse for also not meeting your year guidance, this is it, right? Like last year and the year before, they had the chip shortage that they could count on, and now they got this thing. So they just keep getting all these like excuses while Tesla just keeps moving forward. It's just very interesting.
I was to say it's strange. Their stocks are trading up. They're flat to up, and the UAW picked. I think they picked a very opportune time. This looks like it's going to be peak auto margins and volume, maybe for some period of time. If we progress into a slowdown or some sort of shallow recession, you can already see some of the inventories were building up beforehand. And this looked like, like if they were going to do it, they had to do it now, or they really would lose a lot of leverage. But I just, in the end of this, I feel like they're going to, at some point, they'll converge on a deal. The question is what's left after that deal is made? How competitive are these companies? How competitive is the U.S. in building products? So if the deal came with like, yep, we need all of these things. And by the way, I think on the side of labor, I think, there's been a ton of inflation. I mean, imagine that labor doesn't deserve some magnitude of a raise. I mean, I think that makes sense. But it's more than the wages. This whole thing, I think it gets talked about in the media as like 90%, wages, and $46 an hour, $64 an hour, comparing even companies together when they have completely different compensation packages. But at the end of this is like, how competitive are we going to be? The world is transitioning to EV. China is out shipping right now everybody in EV. If it wasn't for Tesla, the US would be nowhere. And you have Ford that loses $60,000 per EV shipped right now, and then they have this dropped in their lap. And the question is like, if this came as kind of a package deal of like, yep, we're going to figure out all these different efficiencies, we've got to redo our supply chains, we have to redo everything, and oh, by the way, can we make sure that labor is properly taken care of? I think it would hit differently than it hits now. Right now, it just hits like, here's a big kind of sink of money that's and on the when they come out of this, like, I don't think these companies are going to be net stronger. So anyway, I can see both sides of this from a labor perspective and from the company's perspective. But I'm worried that basically just a lot of these jobs are going to move offshore when this is done and kind of the dust settles, because all of these OEMs have plants in Mexico, for example. And I just feel like a lot of this is going to move offshore. And I think it's also going to affect the supply base in the US as well immensely. A lot of the supply base, I saw an article this morning, they're non-union, they can't walk off the folks that run these suppliers are worried about laying off their workforce because they're like, I don't think I can get the labor back once you guys decide you want to start building again. So it's pretty messy. GM, and it looks like it's going to escalate at noon today with GM and Stellantis. And we'll see what we hear by the end of the day, if there's something, closer to a deal with Ford, or is this just a point in the negotiation, and that may expand further. So I think today's going to you'll see a lot more news today.
Yeah, I think that you all had some excellent points. I think what Joe brought up was really smart. There would have been a deal already if Legacy Auto wanted a deal. The fact that this can be an excuse, the fact that this probably positions them for greater bailouts. This is not, and then they can create, the UAW chair as the bad guy. There's a lot of strategy that's going on here. And I'm seeing a lot of misreporting on what UAW is asking for. I'm union myself. I'm one of the rare people that you're going to talk to that's union. My raise is going to be 30% on my newest contract over the next 4 years. But my contract's 4 years overdue. I'm getting a huge back payment. And we negotiate in our contract that only United pilots can fly our routes. But it is something that is easy to twist. So when you look at the UAW saying they want a 32-hour work week, what they're saying is this is a cyclical industry for manufacturing. You don't always run your plants at full capacity. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you the ability to use your workforce at just 32 hours a week and pay us less. And then when you want to ramp it up to a 40-hour work week, you can do that. It's just overtime. So they're actually giving management a lot of flexibility in how they utilize their plants, but then they're taking 8 hours less pay on the average. So they're changing the amount of the raise that they're asking for by the reduced hours. This also would enable Legacy Auto to be able to automate more of the plants and require less people, because now they have the same workforce working less hours. It's almost as if they just allowed Legacy to lay off, like 1 day a week of the workforce. So there's a lot more strategy that's going into this deal than we're seeing. There's probably a lot more going around behind the scenes of what the biggest asks are on both sides, and they're kind of trading them off with each other. I'm really hopeful that they get to some type a productive deal here when all is said and done. And then as far as the layoffs are going on, they are not able to lay off the union workers. But what they do is they start laying off the non-union workers at the plant. And this provides pressure on the union members because that's all their friends. All their friends are calling up and saying, hey, dude, like, when are you going to stop this strike? Because now I don't have a job. Thank you. Like, I was on your behalf until like it affected my income and my job. And now I'm wondering, when are you guys going to just get to the table and negotiate? So there's a lot of strategy going on here, but certainly nobody wins. The only winner in this scenario is Tesla.
Yeah, I think so I think, Amy, you're able to provide some really insightful and obviously, being a union worker yourself, like firsthand experience. I think I think so I think that's really helpful because I'm even digesting it, right? I do think that no matter what, that because they are union, it is going to, like I said, I think Jim Farley said that if they were to like sign the deal that the UAW was presenting, like they would essentially go bankrupt. And so I think that's the balance here, is that clearly I think what these companies are realizing, and again, Amy, I don't know if you would agree, this is just probably my take, is that, I think they're realizing that the business model that they have built over the past 50 to 60 years now, whether it's outsourcing all of their parts to suppliers, into these crazy auto bids, and then also to potentially even unionizing. I would love to know even how, one, can they potentially change the business model, if at all? And then even actually, I wonder what Jim Farley's thinking now, when he's looking at Tesla, when he's looking at potentially some of the stuff that they're doing, because at least, again, I'm not talking about these increases, but Tesla has put out some stats on how they were paying the Nevada factory specifically, and there's no executives there. So the rates, it's about $50 per hour. And there's no executives that were actually based out of there. So the numbers per hour, or the hourly pay, is not skewed. But also too, they get stock, which, I actually have a slide on that Sawyer put out. But yeah, I think it'll be, obviously they're not hopefully going to get like 40% increases and, 20% less work. Obviously it sounds like the 32 to 40 hours that they won't be working, they'll get overtime. But again, imagine they're getting that overtime, but it's time and a half, or whatever it is, which is going to be even more costly again. But yeah, I guess they have to go back to the drawing table if they need to automate more of their systems, and again, just really turn things upside down as far as like how they're producing cars, so that they don't need their workers 40 hours, they need them 32. But I just knowing what I've seen out of legacy auto, the way that they're going to see that is it's 20% less work, but then you're going to be paying those last 8 hours at time and a half on top of their increase. So the amount of costs are going to be absolutely through the roof.
It's not quite like that, because what's gonna happen is, just remember, it's a very cyclical industry, and these plants are not running at the planned capacity all the time. It's actually would give, and I don't know if this is an ask. We don't know if this is something that happens, but what it would allow is for Ford to take out 8 hours a day, 8 hours of production a week of, say, a plant that's going major upgrade changes, where they don't have those labor costs, where those employees are actually taking a pay cut over that time period because they're not working that overtime, allowing Ford or Stellantis to be able to upgrade the plant. But what's most important here is that they just need to come to a deal, and they need to be realistic about the challenges that are facing the industry. And it has to include the ability for them to restructure. It has to include the ability to retrain the workers. And it has to include a path toward the future. And that's really what all sides need to be focused on, or there will be no jobs for anyone, for the CEO or for the workers.
Right.
Do you know? Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say, these things have to happen in phases. I mean, if they went to a 32-hour, they have an expired contract. If they went to a 32-hour work week next month, the work is still there. and they don't have the automation. So they'd have to go most likely and hire extra people to, and this is a membership thing. I think the UAW would want to drive up membership in this way, especially with, they see EV requiring less, a smaller workforce until they vertically integrate. Like, all these things have to happen in phases. Like, if they don't redesign their supply chain, if they don't bring more of these operations in-house, they see UAW membership going down. So I see this as kind of like, okay, well, you can drive membership up if the US SAR is, for auto is still, it's high, even though it's 10 or 12% higher than it was last year. So anyway, in the near term, this would mean these companies would have to go hire more people to build the same number of cars they built the week before the contract expired, because they don't have the automation and these designs are older. So anyway, it's a tricky thing, and like, I think it is being misreported in the media as just like a wage thing. There's so many things, so many facets to this, and to really get the total compensation, there's so many facets to it. And like I said, when you've had 20% inflation, basically, over the last 2 years, and we don't know, it's not being reported in the media. Like, what have their increases been in the last couple of years? I don't know the answer to that question, but they're probably way, way behind inflation, like most people are. So I can see both sides of it.
I think the interesting thing is what we know that Jim Farley said that he kind of is looking for in the future. He's almost discontinuing the current generation of EVs, looking forward to their version of the Gen 3 platform and how they're going to make EV in-house with their own semiconductors and a lot of the parts that they intend to produce themselves at Ford. And he has talked about this as being a pathway to be able to keep workers on site, having them instead manufacturing these parts. It's not good news for their parts suppliers, but it is good news for the Ford workers. Now, that needs to be a topic of the conversation in the strike. And that's when I'm like, they really need to be negotiating toward the future and be very realistic that this is an existential crisis for these companies. And they need to be working together if they have any chance of being able to survive. And some of that is going to likely be licensing tech from Tesla and being realistic about where are we behind, where can we maneuver, where do we have a chance to make a profit. Ford said that and I do think I say Ford because Mary Barra seems to have lost the plot. She seems so far from having any type of realistic plan. But Jim Farley, on the other hand, is very realistic, and he has a plan, and he's really working toward it. And one of the things they're looking at is like their commercial vehicle business and working closely with their commercial customers they already have to try and come up with what EV products would they like. So there are plans there. I think that the problem we're having also is that UAW is, striking Stellantis and GM and Ford. Ford is in a very different situation because they have a plan toward the future than these other companies. And the Ford workers could do something very different than the workers could at the other companies because of what the executives' plans are.
That's what I was wondering too, like about the split, how they split the company. But go ahead, John.
Do we know is a Ford or even GM or Stellantis or oh my gosh, Stellantis. Oh my gosh. Okay. Do we know, can these companies even like get out of union working at all, or their contract overall with UAW, or no? Like
that's tough, man. Once you start a union, it's kind of tough to not become a non-union.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the union would need a vote of no confidence. That's happened before, where unions have been kicked out by the members, usually because they're very unhappy with the deal at the table, or because the strike went on too long, or something like that. It can happen that a union is voted off the property, but mainly it's just the discontent of the union members with the union itself, and it's not much that management can do to create that. The best thing that they can do is what Tesla has done, and that is offering better working conditions offering better pay and better overall upside that Tesla does by having everyone get stock now. There was some comments last week about the stock. Since 2021, everyone at Tesla has been getting stock. So if people there are like, not all employees at Tesla get stock, that's no longer the case. That's old information. They do now.
Yeah, and which actually leads me to this chart, because I met several service techs who have been there at least. Well, this was probably a year or two that had been at the company, so I guess it would be like 8 years now. And they all talked about, it's the stock that is even making it affordable for them to do their job and live in the Bay Area. So if you look at these these stats, the employees, one of the benefits of having that direct access to the company, or the employees are actual Tesla employees, is that they get stock and they get to have a sense of ownership for what they're building, for what they're making. But you can clearly just see, again, Tesla is in a unique situation. Not every company is going to be like this, but they're almost up 2,000% over the past 10 years. But again, I've met 3 or 4 service techs or people that are outside of the corporate office that have been able to do really well and actually make a good living, and even potentially buy a home in the Bay Area because of the incredible performance that Tesla has had in their stock alone. Any thoughts on this? Otherwise, we can keep it moving.
Well, the only thing I'll say is, if the UAW kind of lands both a big win with their members, like it's perceived that they've done a great job, and for somehow if it resonates well in the media, I mean, I could see them going after other non-union shops and leveraging that momentum. Doesn't mean they're going to win. It doesn't mean they're going to, but I can see them leveraging this momentum. And there's I'm hearing a lot of rumors in some of the other finance discussions I'm in of other union shops, getting ready to strike. Basically what they've seen with UPS, what they've seen with UAW, the writers union, so forth. Like I'm hearing that, but it could, or it may or may not happen. But I can also see that just also with the backdrop of what's happening with inflation, I could see more of this happening as well. So I don't think Tesla's at zero risk. I mean, I think Texas is pretty low risk, but I could see them making an attempt. I think we should just be like eyes wide open with that and see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think that the unions are always trying to unionize other shops. I just don't think that. I think that the Tesla workers are very ecstatic to not be striking right now. I think that they're ecstatic to just have this nice, stable, no drama job. Honestly, as a union member, the last thing you ever want to do is strike. It's not something that you're looking forward to. It's not something where you think that would be a good deal. A lot of strikes end up very poorly all the way around, and union members are very aware of that. So the fact that both sides have backed themselves into the situation is just very poorly done on all parts. They needed to be negotiating, they need to be realistic, and they need to be working toward the future.
Well, there's it's not just Tesla, right? Doesn't Toyota or Honda, I think, not have a union? I mean, there's other companies that automakers that don't have unions too. So I'm pretty sure they're all looking at this like, you see, that's why we don't.
Yeah, especially I've met people that work on the line and people that are the service techs, and they need to be putting food on the table. So for them, it's not, they don't care about these politics. They just want their 2-week paycheck. They want to make sure that they're getting paid obviously a fair wage or a good wage, and that I think that's the great thing I think about being able to work at a company like Tesla, where you get the stock, because there's that upside. It would be different, obviously, even if you were at like a Ford or GM, where you are getting stock, and the stock isn't really doing a whole lot, but at least it's an additional way of compensation. But yeah, I would just say the people that are potentially working on the line. And Joe, I know you know several in, out in your area as well. But like, I just don't think that they care about the politics. They just want to make sure that they're getting a weekly paycheck. So some of these type of strikes are just noise. And it's, again, it sounds like, they're not actually laying off other union workers during this time. But as their friends are getting laid off and other people, it's just going to add a lot more friction. And at the end of the day, I think at some point, you may actually see people not necessarily striking because they just want to get back to work and just, because that's what they're focused on. They're not focused on, all of these like, and sure, they want a fair wage. They want to make sure their back paid comes through. But also it's like, that's the weird friction in the room that I would say.
Right.
All right. And then one other big thing that happened this week, obviously the Israeli prime minister visited, they had a kind of outside of the Tesla world. They had obviously the big conversation about AI in general. But specifically, I didn't even realize, I thought they were in New York at the time, but it's crazy. I guess they were in the Bay Area, and they ended up touring the Fremont factory. Along with Elon took him for a ride, even in the Cybertruck around the track. So so I thought that was really cool. But any thoughts on this visit? Potentially, if this means anything specific for Tesla, or if this was a good thing or a bad thing, or
that conversation was incredible. Like man, you really. I mean, Elon's not even a president, but he's still a world leader. Like it's insane. Like the things he's able to do in the country and the negotiations, and just how he's able to bring together the masses of. I mean, he's bringing together world leaders under the Tesla umbrella and SpaceX, and just because they want to do business with him. I mean, that's. The conversation was really good, and I think there's going to be definitely some things to look out for with AI, especially on the Tesla side of things, with Optimus and going forward with the plans that they have for robotaxis and all of that. The training it's going to be very, very interesting times. But yeah, it was pretty wild to watch that, because I was thinking, oh, this is like some remote place, and then I realized that shoot, they were here in Cali, and then they took that truck out, and boy, did he punch it, man. Like that video of them, like the acceleration heading down the straightaway, I was like, holy cow, that guy wants that Cybertruck in Israel. So.
The interesting correlation I make in this is, as an investor, look at how all these countries and entities and world leaders actually want to invest with Tesla. They know like where Tesla, when they set up for manufacturing, or they set up for innovation, they make the place better than what it was before. They leave the place in a much better. They basically elevate that location. I think that's why they're doing very well in China, as well as a lot of other U.S. based companies are under stress. So I just, as an investor, if you think about like buying the stock or investing in the company, investing in the vision of the company, and if you look, all these world leaders also see the same thing, and they want to invest in Tesla, with Tesla. They want Tesla to be part of, their country or their region, and it kind of it's part of the thesis. So like, well, they're vetting it out too, and they're like, all right, they think there's something significant here. So I just like that correlation of the global leadership wanting to invest with Tesla as well.
Yeah, everybody sees it except for Wall Street.
And our current administration, not to get political here.
Yeah, I really like, Joe, what you said about seeing Elon Musk as a world leader. I think that is very insightful and very true. And we're seeing it when we're seeing the influence on really important things for the future that are going to, people will look back and realize how pivotal that conversation was on AI safety that he had with the Israeli prime minister. It was also a great chess move, because there has been some friction between X and Anti-Defamation League for him to have the Israeli prime minister at Tesla. It's the best defense that you could have right there. And then from a startup point of view, Tesla in Israel is a very tech-focused country. Mobileye, which was Tesla's first FSD solution, came out of Israel. They have many startups there. There's companies that Tesla has looked at partnering with in the past. So creating that strong relationship with another tech center is just good business. And I see some opportunities for Tesla Energy or for Tesla EVs. I mean, there definitely could be something that Tesla as a company does in Israel, given the strong technical skill of the workforce.
Yeah, I was I was visiting Seattle this past week, and I met up with Gally from Hyperchange, or now he's starting his own fund, and he's also doing, I think, Two Bros VC. It's like a sitcom that he's like launching out of Seattle. And we were just talking about the amount of hate that specifically Seattle has. It's pretty, I saw it and heard it. It's like weird, even, with the Bay Area, the way it is. Seattle's just a different beat up there. And he's just like, he was just saying that the amount of conversations he's just getting into that where people just haven't seen the history of Tesla. They haven't been around, but there's just this, this over bias of hate for him. And so it's just, it was really interesting. And I think that's the weird thing about the US is that, you see Elon go, and we talked to May a lot about this, his mom, and that, you go to any part of the world, people, they want Elon and one of his companies, whether it's, Tesla, or it's mainly obviously Tesla, but if there's stuff that, his other companies can do to their country to help build like the manufacturing, to build factories and everything else, they want a piece of that. And yet here we are, he's like the doormat for the mainstream media. They continue to run him in the ground. The administration that we currently have has kind of opened up a little bit, but it's still, the same people that were his base for the longest time have now overlooked him. And so he's kind of looking towards the other side of things in some ways, especially with his views and, things that he's said. But yeah, it's just, when you see this stuff, it really just continues to put things in perspective. You have all of these countries, like in the past 6 months, I feel like I've heard APAC the most. But then you've also heard a ton of countries from Europe as well. And he just continues to go and make these relationships. And that's the insane thing is now, right, is that he's not just coming to bring, he doesn't just bring a factory and manufacturing jobs, through SpaceX or Tesla, but now he also has the social platform that he's also going to bring. And so the amount of, as Joe would say, chess moves that he can now make for his companies, because imagine too, like, again, I can't think of a country, but let's just pick Turkey. I'm just gonna, again, nothing against them, but let's say Turkey decides to shut off X or something. That would obviously, probably negate the fact that they would ever get a factory or some of this other stuff. So people are starting to see the writing on the wall, especially as Tesla grows volume to 20 million vehicles. Which, I don't want to steal all the thunder, but I heard, I think it was Alexandra who reposted, and this is the only reason I saw it, but Ron Barron gave like a 2 or 3 minute segment on Tesla. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because, again, Tesla is, if you can get Tesla into your country, it just is going to mean great things for your country, jobs, sustainability, and really just being a leader in tech in the future. But Ron Barron said that we're in the same phase, and I get chills thinking about this. We are in the same phase as Tesla was in 2014 and 2015 when they were producing, a couple 100,000 cars, and they're now doing like 1.8 million. And he's like, if you look at that, like fast forward 7 years, where are we going to be from today? We're in 2023. They're going to be potentially producing high teens of cars. And so if you think about that, it just gives me chills on like what this company is going to do. And they need to build a lot more factories in order to get there. And so that's why it makes sense to see, all of these positive things happening, and him continuing to build like relationships that just go beyond, um, you know, you know, that just go beyond, meeting them. It's actually they want business with Elon. They want him to come in pretty much in any form almost, especially. And the thing too is, again, not to get to, I'll come up for air here in a sec, but Elon is just kind of getting started. Like there's going to be probably 4 or 5 other companies, maybe even 10 companies by the end of the decade that he has started or created. And again, it's just going to become like a whole like wheel of assets. And because there's various things that he wants to have an impact on to make humanity better in what he can control. So yeah, it's just I think all of these world leaders, they know, they can see it. Here I think we're blinded a little bit because of the media and because of just seeing headlines over the years, because everyone now is even saying, yeah, Elon is just doing all of this stuff for money. And it's like, again, he's what, 53, 54, and he's working these insane hours. He's not living like some of these other billionaires just on a beach in a yacht with a, and that he's not. He's working these insane hours, and he knows his mind, the problems that can be solved with his mind can make a great impact. And that's why, and I think these world leaders see that, and it's kind of a disgrace. I mean, I don't think that Elon would ever leave the US or move the headquarters for his company somewhere else, because he said that obviously he's a huge fan of the US, and all of the stuff that he's doing now is possible because of the US. But still, it's one of those things where, I mean, maybe even as he gets older, like he's just going to get fed up with certain things. But obviously we haven't seen that yet. So sorry about that long ramp, that long rant. I can't speak today. All right. So yeah, the next slide, Tesla just, the domination continues. The popularity of EVs in the US, this is from Drive Tesla Canada. The popularity of EVs continues to gain momentum in the US, with new vehicle registration revealing a significant surge in the EV market share. And yeah, it's US is, Tesla has 60% of the market. And again, if you look at all of these other cars, just it's you're talking 10x the amount of volume. So in January, from January to July, it showed that EVs had a 7.2% market share. So yeah, it's EVs are making huge headways there. And then the other stat I wanted to share too is a fifth of the car registrations in the EU are now EV. So, again, Tesla's, has paved the way for a lot of this stuff to happen. Well, I guess I really didn't. I thought I switched slides. Sorry. It's this one. So, yeah. So, again, more than a fifth of the new EU cars are now electric. But any thoughts on this? Again, this is all stuff. I feel like we just passed the Jaguar one. We'll get back to that. But it's just funny how, we're just starting to see the dominoes just fall over.
Yeah, it's funny to me because like we've always lived in a bubble when it comes to like Tesla information and everything like that. For us, I mean, we see it every day. We know the company, we get it, but you start to realize like over 90% of the people have no idea and really don't get it and don't understand what the big deal is. But boy, do they, once they get one, it doesn't matter what it is, but once butts are in seats, they start to realize like, oh, okay. And now that, but this was said like 3 years ago, probably 4 years ago, when people were saying like, oh, it's less than 2% of the market, and then now it's just steadily rising up. But this was always gonna be inevitable when it comes to the growth. You know what I mean? Like that. I mean, the growth is just, it's just going to keep going up. There's that, what they call the S curve is just, I mean, it's inevitable.
Cool. And then, you know, we keep seeing the slow dominoes. I'm still waiting for the Lucid one to come through. Um, but again, I don't know why why the thing messed up here. Okay, but either way, we'll skip this, but I'll just voice it over. Um, Either way, we saw that Jaguar, they just adopted the NACS. So I believe it's like really few cars now. So yeah, it's really, really interesting to see, like, you know, I don't, at this point, I don't even know why these companies are even announcing it, because it's like, I mean, you're literally at this point 3 months late. And I think it's, again, isn't it like Hyundai, I think Lucid, and it's just, I don't remember all the companies' names. I think Sawyer put out
Mercedes.
Mercedes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just, yeah, I don't know. You know, Tesla is just, Tesla has really set the pace for this, and it's really, really cool to see all of these companies adopt. All right, and then here, let's see. Just want to make sure this one. So I don't know if you all saw this. I don't know if you know. All right, so this one. So Redwood Materials, they're expanding in Europe, and they've acquired a leading EU battery recycler, Redux Recycling. This acquisition gives us an immediate US presence to quickly grow operations. 70 experienced technical staff who will join our team, and many partners. But yeah, any thoughts on this? I mean, we had, as some of you may know, we had the Redwood Materials actually show up to the Tesla takeover to receive consumer batteries. So if you had like an old laptop, or, you know, an old work phone or phone just sitting in your drawer, or, you know, just old batteries, you could like bring them. But you know, this company is very important to the growth of Tesla, and so it's, you know, I'm excited to see them expand into the EU.
Yeah, I have some thoughts about this. Redwood Materials doesn't have a direct contract, as far as I'm aware, with Tesla, but they do have a direct contract with Panasonic, and Panasonic that supplies Giga Nevada. So therefore, there would be a tier 2 supplier to Tesla of recycled battery components. It also, we have a dearth in the United States of manufacturers of anodes and cathodes of batteries. And Redwood Materials is developing an anode and cathode line, which is going to be a game changer. And that's, again, it's adding, localization is going to be necessary to be able to change the world to sustainable energy. China has been the leader in battery components. They have an extreme expertise in it, but we can't possibly get to where we want to get to as a world without having the ability to develop batteries in the United States and in Europe and in all these other countries as well. And then if you look at just the sheer enormity and tonnage of materials that is going to be required for Master Plan 3, it's just forgotten that these battery minerals only need to be mined once, and then they're almost infinitely recyclable, especially if you use a 4680 battery technology with a dry battery electrode, where no solvents are used, because the solvents will degrade those battery minerals when otherwise they wouldn't degrade.
Definitely. I think some other news. I think there's two things. Let's hit on this. I don't know, Jeff. We could also get your thoughts on this one. This is like lithium being down. So benchmarks, global weighted average lithium ion cell prices fell about 8.7 in August, to dip below $100 per kilowatt hour. Is this stuff, Jeff, I think you've been noticing, or, you know, how do you think that this helps? I mean, obviously we can get into that, but how do you think this helps Tesla?
I don't think Tesla experienced the brunt of lithium going up. I don't think they're. I think they will capture some of these savings on the down, but it's not going to be this instantaneous spot pricing type situation. So I think they do a good job protecting themselves from the unfavorable upside of commodity costs. And by the way, like the commodity index, commodities are starting to tick up again. A lot of it's just being driven by oil and the impact of oil on it's a chain reaction to all the other commodities. But they're essentially over. You look at some of the commodity indexes; they're starting to creep over their 200-day moving average, and we should keep an eye on that because that could start to negatively weigh on input costs. But right now, I would say Tesla doesn't for lithium. They don't really experience the brunt of this either way. But in terms of being able to capture some of this upside, I think they would be quicker than most to actually get to that. But I think the key for Tesla is actually developing this capacity themselves. So if this does become a bottleneck, they can kind of turn that on or off that faucet as needed, and they can also be a lot more competitive on the global stage by doing that themselves. They didn't start that lithium refinery kind of on a whim. They view this as this is going to be like a multi-year threat that they're going to be dealing with. So we're going to revisit this again, but I think they're going to be much better armed, call it a year or two from now.
Yeah, everything they're doing at Texas, like what you're saying, like just the Corpus Christi, and then also having the cathode facility there. I mean, they are really just setting out those pieces and just setting up for like Jeff says, like the future. And I believe you had also mentioned before, Jeff, that more than likely they set up these crazy contracts just to insulate themselves from impending rate hikes and things like that. So
yeah, they have tremendous leverage. Sorry, Amy.
Oh, no. I would say this is actually kind of I have a question for Jeff in just a second. But I think that the number one thing I thought when I saw this is that what Jeff is continuously reminding people about is you cannot look at price without knowing the COGS and the underlying cost associated with the company. And it's been just this consistent conversation about just price and ignoring COGS. And even though in this case, the way that Tesla's lithium contracts are structured, these are long-term deals. The spot price is just one element of how the contract is priced, and that's to kind of protect Tesla's suppliers and to protect Tesla, where it will probably likely have a spot price component to it. So if the costs go way up, that Tesla's suppliers are protected, but that's not what Tesla pays. But we already know that Tesla had said in an earnings call that they were looking at renegotiating some of those contracts. And to the extent that they have any contracts out there that weren't renegotiated, it would seem to me like this would be a good time to go in and offer to extend some contracts and see if they can get some more favorable terms with the spot price today. What would the typical procedure be there, Jeff?
It depends. Each contract is independent. Obviously, they just did one. I think that that would be a little bit more difficult. But in general, I think the approach to this is you kind of look at future business, like what you're forecasting. You look at your current run rate, and you look at what you've done. Like, are you taking the material that you've ordered? And Tesla has the reputation, it has the data that says, yeah, we take everything that we order. We don't push anything out. They're mission driven, but they're also financially driven as well. But a lot of companies play this game of ordering product and then rejecting it at the end of the quarter if it doesn't meet their total financial needs because they don't want the inventory sitting on their books. Tesla is not in that position. So they are highly, they have a huge advantage going into these negotiations, and they could pretty much reopen most contracts, I would think, pretty frequently if they need to. This isn't like you can only look at it every 4 years kind of thing. Sometimes, like even some of the union contracts, for example, this isn't collective bargaining. They have leverage where they can kind of go in, because this industry is moving pretty quickly, so they've got to move quickly, and they got to expect their supply base to move quickly. So it's actually, I would think, quite flexible, but at the same time, they're fair with their supply. If you have a history of not being fair with your supply base, there's gonna be this apprehension on both sides, and you're not gonna be able to do these deals pretty quickly. But they have this history of, I mean, I think when you enter into a contract with Tesla, it's like, it's one of the best awards you can possibly get. If you win a part on the Model Y, you're winning a part on the highest volume product line in the auto industry. So they're high. They have a huge advantage. There's one other thing. Sorry, I didn't want to
Go for it.
disrupt. There's just one other thing connected to Texas. I should have sent this in. I forgot. Sawyer shared an article about. I guess there were some plans. There was a presentation by Texas management, Tesla Texas management, about like their plans for the future of that site. And everybody's kind of hung up on this, growing to 60,000 people on that site, which would be huge. The thing that actually stood out to me the most was what they actually have done this year, growing, I think, from around 12,000 headcount to 20,000. First off, we know the labor environment, what it is today. I've actually opened and run a tech factory from Greenfield in Texas. It is very difficult to get that kind of labor, and for them to basically increase their workforce by 70%, 9 months into the year. That just floored me that they were able to find that labor, bring it in, and actually be able to train up that workforce. That shows that there's some other competitive edge that they have that I don't think others are seeing or at least understand yet. To be able to grow your workforce like that in that short period of time, it's really difficult to do. Just leave it there.
Yeah, no, and I think what I thought of, Jeff, again, and Amy mentioned this too. It's like, Tesla. This is a good reminder for myself, just because of So some of these like crazy components or materials that are needed for Tesla, because as you said, a lot of these contracts are are years out, right? Like multi-year deals. And so they may, depending on when they're renegotiating the contract, obviously they could take depending on the timing, take these downward trends as a positive. But I think that's the biggest thing, is that even though they may be on the downward trend, it may not mean that it's necessarily benefiting Tesla right now, because they're probably they're already getting the best deal anyways, because of the volume that they can drive, especially in the lithium world, especially with the amount of lithium that they're pushing through.
One other thing about Tesla, their presence in Shanghai is immensely strategic in terms of understanding pricing regionally. At one point, I had my company was acquired by a Chinese company, and then they actually reversed it and they put us in charge. So I was in charge of big portions of their supply chain. So I had a Chinese supply chain and I had an American, headquartered supply chain. And we had completely different approaches to negotiation. We had completely different approaches to a lot of different things. But the intelligence that we learned in terms of pricing, in terms of negotiations, in terms of how that was working in China, and the intelligence you could gather by having a very, very strong supply chain in China, I think is really helping Tesla's cost structure globally. So that door handle, right? That door handle that's on the Model Y, they have a local supplier very near Shanghai. They're 95% locally sourced now, I believe, when they build in Shanghai. And that data they have and that cost structure to build that part, it's a world. Right now, what's happening with Ford and GM is they're actually starting to become isolated, and even in VW, like their market share is going down in China. Their presence is massively reducing, and Tesla is growing. So I think they have a very unique position of being a very strong American company that has a very strong presence in China, and then now they're going to recreate that in India, we believe too. So just a huge supply chain advantage to have both of those sets of eyeballs in China, and then in abroad.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, especially, I mean, it's different when you are a brand new company that enters, and you would know this probably better than anybody. But when you're entering into like one or two markets, you have even a leading product in a space. But then as you branch into these other countries, it becomes really hard, right? And I think that because you get these insane tax rates, like if you were to go to Brazil, you get like a 40% tax rate, or India, it's even something more insane. And there's even these certain price points that the commodities get to where they're seen as a luxury thing, where the amount of people that are going to be able to potentially buy just causes like a lot of friction. But I guess what I'm trying to say is Tesla, because they, even in the US, they have 60% of the EV market share. They're the ones making this happen worldwide. And so they can come to the table, as long as they're continuing to make the right moves behind the scenes and building the right relationships. I think it was a couple months ago we were talking about the relationship with Korea, which gives them access to India. And so as they're making all of those moves, and then also too, as you have, we just discussed it, a world leader like Elon, who can help, who everyone's pretty much coming and knocking at the door. You have Thailand, Indonesia, Mongolia, like the amount of countries that continue to come to knock at his door will give him all the leverage so that his companies can benefit from having, like these local suppliers be able to break into these countries that have been maybe more historically a lot different. Like India is a prime example of that. So it's just, it's really, really interesting to see how a lot of this stuff is unfolding. And so I think, it's all that stuff is just like really, really helpful. Some other stuff that's happening, EU funds supercharging startup. Tesla receives 149 million in new EU charging funding. And a little snippet from there, EU is keen to support the development of electric vehicles, which is why it is so focused on growing the charging network. Obviously, as we all know, Tesla offers the widest and most reliable charging, which can provide comfortable travel for EV drivers throughout the region. Easy and fast access to charging is one of the most important factors for wider adoption of EVs. So again, I think more and more companies are realizing this. Actually, the other day too, it was interesting to see. I was at a Chevron, and I saw it was a charging point, thing, but it was labeled Chevron, and they actually had a charging stop, two chargers that were literally at the Chevron. And again, I'm glad to see that was the first time I think I ever saw an actual charging station at a gas station, like in the US. I'd seen a lot in the EU. But I think people are starting to realize that, hey, this is the future, and that you need also fast charging. You can't just be having these old charge points that would just take forever to charge, and they assume you're going to be there for 8 hours. I mean, but more and more people, I think, need to continue to step up. But it's good to see the EU obviously continue to pat Tesla on the back. And then I think that there was some other things, like the Saudi Arabia thing happened this past week. Of course, mainstream media was just saying that, hey, Tesla is going to Saudi Arabia, or it's in early talks. And Elon's like, nope, that's utterly false. Good old Wall Street Journal for getting clickbait. So I think that was happening as well. And then I think there was one other cool thing that happened. I'll let Joe hit this one. Joe, you're still on mute.
Okay, yeah, now I'm unmuted.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought this was very interesting. Like just to know that especially for the market that the Model 3 is in, and how how wide of a spectrum it reaches. You know, I mean, like there's a lot of people who don't need a Model X and they don't need a Model Y, but I mean, as we still see, Model 3 is still very popular, and to know that, man, these vehicles are the least stolen vehicles. Like, I mean, all Teslas, I think in general, they just happen to put Model 3, I think, because of the volume of numbers that it does. But just knowing that you can purchase a vehicle and that's just another level of security, I think, for the brand that, you know, isn't talked about enough. You know what I mean? Like the safety and things. I even saw a video this weekend where a Model Y, somebody veered into the lane and the Model Y just, like, while on autopilot, just smooth got away from it. And there was another video where a guy was like trying to press his accelerator and the car wouldn't go. And he was like, what the heck is happening? He thought something was wrong with it because the light was green. And then all of a sudden, here comes a freaking car barreling down the freaking road and saved his hide. You know what I mean? Like, I think safety and I think just the security around what Tesla has done with the brand to create like that Apple-esque, you know, level of security where like people aren't really breaking into them and doing all that type of things that, you know, that outside forces would lead you to believe, like, oh man, if it's a phone, if it's a computer on wheels, then that means it can be hacked. And it's like, how often does that happen? So I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and it, you know, it definitely clearly nowadays, especially I would say, Seattle. Yeah, being up in Seattle it was a similar feeling that I got, and I think they struggle with a lot of the same problems as San Francisco. But like, you know, sometimes you would think that like having a car recording all the time would make a difference, but because obviously we know that the police won't follow up, that's not the biggest deterrent. But still, it's so important to know that the car that you have is recording. At least you're going to have evidence if something does happen. Something you could potentially, depending on what's happening, even if there's not a theft, if there's stuff that happened around that same time. I mean, I know Joe and I have probably seen a lot of you know, owners or other people just say, hey, if you were around this area during this time and you had a Tesla, please contact the police department because maybe you had some type of recording and stuff. But yeah, Amy, we're going to say something.
Yeah, I had the opposite of this. I when I was in college, I had a Honda Civic, and it was the most stolen car that was out there. And sure enough, one day I walked out of my house, looked at the curb, and my car wasn't there, and it had been stolen. And so the fact that that Teslas are very difficult to not, we're not talking break into, we're talking steal the entire car, is actually a huge advantage. They ended up finding the car. It was completely trashed. The insurance company didn't total it, but I almost wish they had, because by the time it was fixed, it was never the same again. These things, the security of the car is very important.
Definitely. Well, I think that brings us to all of the latest updates this past week. So hopefully you all were able to get caught up. Again, thanks for joining us this past week, whether you're on X, YouTube, or even Facebook. So we appreciate you tuning in to this weekly podcast. Please give all of our hosts a follow as they, you know, spend each time during the week here with us, as they could be other places during this time. So we appreciate it. So, and feel free to use the referral codes as well. They're listed if you're on YouTube to patronize the hosts. But we, again, appreciate your time this week. So thanks for watching the Tesla Beat, and thank you to the host for making this happen.